every single day, every weekend, 24/7. It does not matter.
Tell them what breaking the black barrier mean, man. What they look like,
What is
man?
black, man?
What is black?
Copper Color Productions, man. The Copper Color King Cash Morals and Money, man. Let's get it.
Black King, stand up for understand what black is. It's the essence, it's the culture. We've been on this earth, you heard? The Bronx was called for Apache. Huh? The Bronx was called for Apache, man. Oh, last breed, bro. We bringing it back, last breed.
Really forever flying in this bitch, man. For the ancestors, baby. For all the ancestors out there, baby.
I just realized we had that bad boy going for 6 minutes. My apologies, y'all. My apologies. My dearest apologies, man. Tap in. Copper Colored Love, man. Copper Colored Love. We in the building. Some more Reconstruction era in the American South today, baby. Yes, sir. We are in this bad boy, man. And we're going to talk about a lot of good stuff today. We're going to react. First of all, we're going to react a little bit to the 2024 presidential election. And I want to show y'all something, right? It's so funny because we caught them slipping, man. We caught you slipping, Sloppy Joe. We caught you slipping, man. But we're going to react a little bit to the 2024 presidential election. And a lot of what's going on today, man, people will be surprised how much it connects to the past. We are living in the past right now. Literally. It's just that at this point in time, you don't got, colored people representing different states or in high places of Congress, at least not that we know of. Let's just say that, the only two faces we see right now in terms of the presidential election is Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But there's way more. We got a couple more candidates that's actually going, that's running for president this year. And it's two black guys. We got two copper colored brothers, right? And then we got a brown brother from the Middle East, or Hindu, whatever. I don't even know too much about him, I'm gonna be honest. But yeah, we are living in the past, man. Make sure you vote this year. I want everybody to understand. Make sure you vote. Don't run along with that idea that the black vote don't count, because I ain't gonna front. This is gonna make or break the future in this world. That's just my point. It's gonna make and break the future of America. That's my opinion. Right, we all know that it's a battle of each are evil, right? Both of them is evil, right? But which one we gonna take? Like, which one is keeping it a buck with us, right? Letting us know what it is. More or less, though, man. Reconstruction era in the American South, part 2. And what we gonna talk about today is pretty much the NAACP and their connection to the Communist Party. See, a lot of people don't know, right? Well, most people know this already, but the NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and has been one of the most prominent civil rights organizations in the United States. One of the most prominent, right? Representing black people, representing colored people. One of the most prominent in the United States. It was founded in 1909. The NAACP has played a crucial role in the fight against racial discrimination, as we all know, and the advancement of equal rights for African Americans, y'all. That's the claim. This is the claim. However, the organization's history is not without controversy, as it has been accused of having ties to communist groups, letting y'all know, and individuals over the years. In this video, we will explore the complex relationships between the NAACP and the communist movement, y'all, examining the evidence and the arguments on both sides. We're going to read a nice little book. All right, we're going to read through a nice little book that's breaking down the connection the NAACP had with the Communist parties. Now, first thing I want to say, right? We got the slideshow going through. First thing I want to say, let's stop recognizing these people as leaders of black history. Let's denounce them of these titles right away. I'm going to show y'all who this lady is. It's going to be a banger. And this brother right here, he denounced himself. Right? A spy, another spy. Actually, right? Let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about it. We're going to go through it one by one. Booker T. Washington. So what did this brother do wrong? This brother decided to follow the honky, right? When it was time to organize colored people in America, he was a part of that movement that advocated that people had to go to school to learn labor that they were already growing up doing. They had to go to school. Right? You have to pay to go to an institution. Now a degree is required to work specific jobs that people were already doing off of basic knowledge. Let's remember, we were here first. The Americas is our land. So we lived off the land. This brother, Booker T. Washington, was one of the brothers siding with them honkies when it was time to line us up and put us in these institutions, these HBCUs that are owned by uncolored people, unseasoned chicken, my G. Straight up. Right? And I want to denounce him of his leadership or remembrance in Black history. Use a dub. Next. This brother right here. Oh my gosh. We could go on for days about him. First of all, he's a hater. He's a hater. Second of all, right, if it was 2024 today, he wouldn't even claim that he was black. He is the number one communist. The number one communist, and also one of the founders of the NAACP. See, W.E. Du Bois set us up. He set us up. He set us up. And it's so funny because, not to mention, these brothers, they didn't even get along with each other, right? But yet they preaching all of this, black that, but can't even see eye to eye with the other quote unquote black activists in America at the time. Right? He set us up. I'm denouncing him of his role as a leader in Black America. His remembrance. You're a dub. Next. Marcus Garvey. People hate when I touch bases on this brother because it's like, in New York City, right, we got a park named after him, a block, right? A park named after him, right? So many people in New York look up to this brother. You go to Jamaican restaurants, his pictures is all over the place, right? I get it, right? Bob Marley, Rastafari, all of that. People, big ups to them, right? Big ups to them. I love all my chaba them. I love them, right? Truly and unruly, for real. But y'all cannot abide by this man and his bullshit. Impossible. Right? He was even denounced as a fraud back in them days because of his rhetoric and blasphemy. Right? People forget. Like, a lot of these organizations, groups, Rastafaris, all of that, those things are new. They are newly founded organizations. Those are not organizations that were here when the Most High preached his word to the man. We're going to denounce him for misleading us, but also trying to put us in the right direction, right? Not going to take that away. For misleading us and also colonizing Africa. You colonizer? He colonized Liberia, or what is now known as Liberia. Right, we got to denounce him, right? Because him and his Masonic buddies left to Africa to colonize a little portion of land to start this Back to Africa movement. Denounced. 00. Who do we got right here? I want to talk about this lady real quick. Right, people don't know about Shawty. Her name is Mary Church Terrell. Right, and she was one of the first women, or one of the women who were among the founders of the NAACP. Now, you know what's so funny about this lady? She doesn't even have black ancestry. Her and her family, right? They come from, what they say, Madagascar? Right, Madagascar? So she's not even black. Right, that's number one. 2, she doesn't come from a slave family. She comes from a wealthy family. Her father was with slave owners traveling up and down the Mississippi, capturing our ancestors, right? Our ancestors, capturing and selling our ancestors. Her father was quote unquote documented as a slave, but also had some wealth, right? I can't understand how they always want you take slave to wealth, right? That fast after emancipation, and even prior, right? It's so crazy. It's so crazy. We gonna denounce old girl, right? We denouncing her. She's a dub. And like I said, J. Edgar Hoover didn't even claim his black ancestry, right? He denounces himself. So he's a big double O. And then we got Harriet Tubman, the Union spy, postal service worker, and the Union spy. All of these individuals we will speak about during this series, right? During this Reconstruction period series, right? We're going to talk about all these individuals. But more or less, though, I want to get into this. So like I said, we're going to react a little bit. We're going to react a little bit to the 2024 presidential election. Now, check this out, right? This is so funny because we spoke about this in the last live stream. But this is how we can always put the pieces together, right? Ourselves. Joe Biden sold himself out during this election. Like, Trump ain't do too good himself, but Joe Biden sold himself out. Because what we learned, the Democratic Party, right? The Democratic Party in America were publicizing propaganda, creating groups, insurrection groups like the Ku Klux Klan, to terrorize communities and disrupt the elections. This was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Listen to what Joe Biden says, right? Check this out.
President Biden, I want to give you a minute.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill. And all those people, every one of those who were convicted, deserves to be convicted. The idea that they didn't kill somebody, just went in and broke down doors, broke the windows, occupied offices, turned over desks, turned them over statues. The idea that those people are patriots? Come on. When I asked him those first two debates we had, the debates we had first time around, I said, will you denounce the Proud Boys? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing to, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now? Will you denounce the people who attacked that Capitol? What are you going to do?
I'm going to give you a minute, President Trump, for a follow-up. President Biden, you have said, quote, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans are determined to destroy American democracy. Do you believe that the tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for President Trump will be voting against American democracy?
The more they know about what he's done, yes. The more they know about what he's done. And there's a lot more coming. He's got a lot of cases down the road coming around. He's got a whole range of issues he has to face. I don't know what the juries will do, but I do know he has a real problem. And so the fact that, could you ever think you heard any president say that I'm going to seek retribution? Did you ever hear any president say that I thought Hitler had some good ideas? What got me involved to run in the first place after my son had died, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq, I said I wasn't going to run again. Until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas, torches, and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang back in Germany.
We caught you slipping, Sloppy Joe. We caught you slipping. We know what them Democrats been doing for years, man. We know what they've been doing for years, man, since the 1800s. Look, we covering the Reconstruction era. Check out the YouTube, Copper Color King, Breaking the Black Barrier, Copper Color Productions. Right? And throughout the book, as we read and learn about the Reconstruction era, what they say, right? This is just some of the propaganda that the Democratic Party was involved in back in that day, right? It says many white Southerners believed the new biracial regimes had been illegally imposed on them by the U.S. government and felt justified in resisting. Democrats, or Democrats, sometimes through organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan, resulted to intimidation, violence, and fraud to influence the outcome of elections. So like I said, y'all, we caught Joe Biden slipping. The man tried to say that Trump's presidency, right, resulted in basically different groups of people coming out the woodworks holding swastikas and promoting the same rhetoric that folks was talking in Germany, right, in Nazi Germany, right? Propaganda at its fondest. Propaganda at its fondest. And what's so crazy about it is that we learn as we go, right? The Democrats were responsible for this propaganda. American history, man, it's interesting. Like I said, it's interesting because you learn that a lot of this stuff that's happening now, right, is a domino effect of things that has happened in the past, right? And this is why the saying, you won't know where you're going until you know where you come from, is so important. Because what forces can we fight when we don't know who's the evil ones, right? We can sit here and assume that all Caucasian unseasoned people are evil, right? But that's not the case. That's not the case. Some of our own colored brothers and sisters are evil. Like this lady here. We're going to sit here and say that she evil. Why? Because she got connections to these people. The NAACP. Now, like I said, we're going to bring the books out. We're going to bring them things out. The ugly truth about the NAACP. Right? Connections to communism. Connections to communism. Why is this so deep? Because communism, socialism, Marxism, that is what the racism in America is founded off of. It's communism, commies, right? Coming here to America in the 1800s, changing the entire direction of the country. Like the people coming over here, coming from countries, right? Like, and it's not to say that everybody over there do bad, right? Germany, Russia, Poland, Turkey, right? Coming over here to America and infiltrating the system, right? Folks like Mary Church Terrell. Now, why is she important? Like I said, we've been reading through the Reconstruction era. And what we learned about the NAACP is that she is one of their founders, right? And look, like I said, Booker T. Washington, they say that he's one of the most renowned African-American leaders of the era. A savvy educator who many whites constructed as a spokesman for his race. Why is that? Because he publicized that bullcrap, right? He's the reason why now, just to work in a call center, you might need a college degree. All right, just to do jobs that just take personality, a good personality, you need a college degree. This man, that who many whites constructed as a spokesman, is responsible for that. A straight up sucker, right? They quote unquote born enslaved, quote unquote, and later became the founding superintendent of Tuskegee College, now Tuskegee University. But back to Mary Church Terrell, they started talking about African American women, and they said that they also constituted institution building activities, institutionalism, right? Institutionalism, brainwashing, that remained critical to the well-being of communities. They had continued to cultivate the kinds of local organizations they began immediately after the war, the Civil War, adjusting their activities to the needs of their communities and gradually forming coalitions with other like-minded black women's groups, first in their own areas and eventually across the country. In 1896, leading women from Washington and Boston called for the formation of a national black women's organization. Meeting that summer at the First Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., another institution, right? These Baptist churches, institutions, places that indoctrinize people in a specific rhetoric or a specific agenda that is usually publicized through propaganda. And it began in Washington, D.C. Now, what are the odds, right? Like, we're going to connect all the dots that the First Baptist Church was established in Washington, D.C., where basically the stomping grounds of our government resides. Why they got a church out there? Why is the First Baptist Church out there? And why they calling this lady African American? Right? That's cap. They founded the National Association of Colored Women, the NAACP. The organization's first president, Mary Church Terrell, stated the next year that activist black women saw themselves as the mothers, wives, daughters, and sisters of our race. The NAACP existed, she said, because our peculiar status in this country at the present time seemed to demand that we stand by ourselves in this special work for which we have organized. Terrell herself was the daughter of a prominent Memphis businessman, Robert Church, right? Robert Church, who we gonna learn about. Like I said, they're gonna say that this man is black. He is not black. No, sir. May have a little bit. Nah. It's not a black man. Not a copper colored brother, not like us. Why are we gonna debunk that? Like, he comes from wealth. This Robert Church man comes from wealth. Wealthy families. Right? During slavery, these people most likely identify with either white, mulatto, right? Just to escape the enslavement or just harsh treatment or racism in general. Right? In general. But more or less though, right? She served on the District of Columbia Board of Education and was among the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. Right? She was among the founders. Who are the founders of the NAACP? We got W.E. Du Bois, Mary White Overton. This is not a black woman. This is not a black woman, y'all. Where's her family from? We gonna have to do the research on her. Right? We gonna have to do the research on her. Where's her family from? Can we see a mother and father? Right? But look, she was a part of the Socialist Party of America. What is the Socialist Party known for? It's communism. That's all communism. Influenced by the ideas of William Morris, another white man or Caucasoid fellow, and several others. So, one of the founders of the NAACP, a socialist, were influenced by the ideas of another brother named William Morris. And he was from Europe, Essex. Strong influence of medievalism, a system of belief and practice inspired by the Middle Ages of Europe, or by devotion to elements of that period which have been expressed in areas such as architecture, literature, music, arts, philosophy, scholarship, and various vehicles of popular culture. So medievalism is basically a practice of changing a culture. That's what medievalism is. Essentially, that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. And it was inspired by the Middle Ages. And we see the Middle Ages was a period in time that changed the entire direction of the way the world was living. See, we now look, and we're gonna talk about a lot of this stuff as we go deeper into the Moorish and the history of the Moors in Europe segment, right? But the Dark Ages, the fall of Rome, the Renaissance, a lot of these periods are important in history, because what we know from history is that copper-colored people brought folks who looked like this, right, up out of these Dark Ages. And they were kind of resentful to folks for that. They resented a lot of us for that. They resented a lot of people for that. And this is what resulted into what we know as the Reconquista, or the Inquisition. Right? So medievalism is basically a term used for the changing of a culture or influence in a culture. So this lady, Mary White Overton, was a follower of William Morris, who was an influencer of medievalism. So her philosophy essentially was medievalism, influencing or taking over a popular culture. Also, she was a socialist, aka communist. These are the founders of our NAACP. All right, who else do we have? Moorfield Story. Well, who's this guy? Right? A lawyer, activist, a civil rights leader in Boston, Massachusetts. He held the worldview that embodied pacifism and anti-imperialism. Pacifism. To pacify. Pacifism is to pacify. Is the opposition of resistance to war, mandatory military service, or violence. Pacifism, huh? Oh no, it's the opposite. That they should be peacefully resolved. He was a pacifist, so he believed that, quote unquote, that things should be resolved with peace. He served as a founding president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He was born in Roxbury, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston. His family was the descendants of the earliest Puritan settlers in New England and had close connections with the abolitionist movement. Story's father was a Boston lawyer. The young Story went to the Boston Latin School and graduated in 1862, during the beginning of the Civil War. He continued on to Harvard University, where he was a member of the Glee Club. He graduated 1866. A lawyer, he practiced law. And they saying that he was an abolitionist, right? Now, this guy could also be a socialist. He can also be a socialist. Moorfield Story. Let's remember his name. We're going to return to this one. We're going to talk about him in another video. I'm going to do some more research. But again, another person who does not represent what we've been through, controlling the direction of organizations that's supposed to represent what we've been through. We got Ida B. Wells. You know, she's very prominent and influential. Probably another socialist too, though. And then look, a Henry Moskowitz. And he was born in Husi, Romania. He was Jewish. And he migrated to the United States in 1833. So one of the founders of the NAACP wasn't even in America around the time where you were supposed to be in America. He knows nothing about slavery in America. Henry Moskowitz. This man is from Romania. He is from Romania. He earned his philosophy degree in Germany. Another socialist. Bet my bottom dollar. Like I said, these are the communist founders of the NAACP. Now, like I said, we're going to return to Mary Churchill. Mary Church Terrell. Now, like they said, her father, Robert Church, was a wealthy man. That's what they told us. Right? He was a wealthy man. Robert Church was a wealthy businessman. We're going to talk about this Robert Church dude for a little while. Just to understand, where Mary Church Terrell, one of the first African American women to represent black women in America, and probably one of the most to incredibly mislead black women in America. We're going to talk about her father, Robert Reed Church. They claim that this is a black man. Their claim is that this is a black man. That's their claim. That's their claim, right? He was born June 18th, 1839. Dude's a Gemini. And he was an American entrepreneur and businessman and landowner in Memphis, Tennessee, who began his rise during the American Civil War. Like I said, a lot of people, war makes people rich, and war also makes people poor. And the Civil War was one of those wars that left people in them specific situations. They say he was the first African American millionaire in the South. Where did this man learn how to become a millionaire? He built a reputation for great wealth and influence in the business community. He founded Solvent Savings Bank, the first black-owned bank in the city, which extended credit to blacks so they could buy homes and develop businesses. Right? And this is a very big, right? Because it's statements like this that they make that we would think applies to the entire black population, but it doesn't. Yeah, a lot of black people got wealthy off of stuff like that, but also there was still a lot of poor black folks who were not willing and able to benefit from benefit from business deals like these. Right? They weren't able to benefit. A lot didn't own homes. A lot didn't develop businesses. But for those who did, the majority of them had close ties to Masonic communities in the bourgeoisie. That's just straight up facts. It's the truth. They even segregated themselves from poorer, blacker communities. He was a philanthropist. He used his wealth to develop a park, playground, auditorium, and other facilities for the black community, who were excluded by state-enacted racial segregation for most such amenities in the city. Big ups to him for that, though, for sure. They say he is the son of a black mother and a white father. Church began working as a steward when his father, a steamboat owner, took him along on his route between Memphis and New Orleans. Robert Church bought his first property in Memphis in 1862. He was well established by 1878-79. The years of devastating yellow fever epidemics, which resulted in dramatic depopulation in the city. Right, the flu was wiping folks out. Same stuff that took out the Aboriginal ancestors that we have. Right, but look, son of a black mother and a white father. He worked with his father, who was a steamboat owner. Now, what it says is Robert's mother, Emmeline. Oh, first off, let's rewind. They say he was born a slave. They say that he was born a slave. However, this slave and his white father, who owned a steamboat, took him on routes between Memphis and New Orleans, transporting slaves. This brother was not born a slave. He was born to a wealthy family. who most likely owned slaves. He had a black mother and white father. Robert Reed Church was born a slave? No, he was born wealthy. His father, Captain B. Charles B. Church, a white steamship owner from Virginia, he operated along the Mississippi River. Emmeline was the daughter of an enslaved Malay, who some are copper colored, right? For the most part, you could say these brothers is copper colored, definitely, right? But that's not entirely the case with Robert Reed Church now. And we can't honestly believe that, especially with these phenotypes. But he represented the bourgeoisie. You know, he represented these sellouts. He represented them. And that's just to have some background on this Mary Terrell Church, because her ideologies and her reasons for doing what she did stems from her environment. What she grew up, where she grew up, and what she grew up under. Grew up under her father. Look here, in this part it says, Robert Reed Church and Louisa Aries were freed slaves of mixed racial ancestry. And they were members of the black elite of Memphis after the Civil War. These black elites, right, being Masons and other peoples and whatnot. Now we're going to talk about the ugly truth of the NAACP. We got to talk about it, right? Just listen to some of the things that they say about this group or organization that we can say represented African Americans, quote unquote. Right, so what it says. Where shall we start? So, biographical sketch of Eugene Cook, Attorney General of Georgia. Here it lists a bunch of names. Let's move forward. It is always a source of genuine personal satisfaction for me to have the opportunity of appearing before this group. All of the organizations to which I have had the privilege of belonging, none has accorded me a greater degree of support and operation than the Peace Officers Association of Georgia. This rapport, I feel, is due principally to the fact that we share common professional objectives and personal convictions. As servants of our fellow citizens, we are made acutely aware of the grave responsibility inherent in protecting the rights and liberties of the people through vigorous and impartial enforcement of the law. As individuals charged with this solemn duty, we are able to see more clearly than others the threat to those rights and liberties posed by those who would substitute government by men for government by law. Right? So the person speaking or narrating this article is a member of the Peace Officers Association of Georgia. And what they claim that they represent the people. They expose the government and they represent the people. Right? So listen to what they say. It is because of your demonstrated discernment in this regard that I have chosen this occasion as the proper forum for revealing, for the first time, the authenticated details of the most ominous of these threats to arise during our lifetime. I refer to the subversive designs behind the current crusade of the misnamed National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and its fellow traveling fronts to force upon the South and the communist-inspired doctrine of racial integration and amalgamation. It shall be my purpose in this speech to totally disrobe the NAACP and to present this sinister and subtle organization in all its nakedness. This dude is about to go off on the NAACP. He is about to go off. I need y'all to pay attention to this part specifically. Pay close attention because this is the stuff that we don't know. We don't know. We didn't learn this. They didn't teach us this in school. They told us that the NAACP represented us, and that was an organization created to represent the people and stand for the people, and whatever the case may be. But that's not true. None of it is true. None of it is true. Check it out. The ugly truth about the NAACP and its origin, aims, and manipulators is so shocking as to stagger the imagination. But it is borne out by incontrovertible facts which can be established as matters of official record. These facts have been uncovered, checked, assembled, and correlated through many weeks of intensive investigation and cooperative effort by my staff and the staffs of Congressman James C. Davis of Georgia and Senator James O. Eastland of Mississippi. Let's try to see if we can get some backdrop on these people. All right, these were other white people, other unseasoned people. But those folks claim to be true Americans. These guys, right? These guys claim to be true Americans. I am prepared to prove everything I shall say, and I wish to state for the benefit of those who undoubtedly will attempt to smear me and discredit my findings and conclusions that I would welcome the opportunity to present the evidence I have in hand for determination before a trial jury and court of law. My boy said, you could shun me, you could say I'm wrong, but the minute you do, I'm gonna pull out facts. Facts of what? Facts that the NAACP is sinister, and that they sellouts, and that they sold us to other governments. At the outset, I wish to make it clear that the issue involved is one not of race, but rather of subversion. None of the organizations which have exploited the race issue in this country has ever had the welfare of the Negro people at heart. What? None of the organizations which have exploited the race issue in this country has never had the welfare of Negro people at heart. This was never done to benefit colored people. None of these organizations, that's what they saying. They have seized upon this issue as a convenient front for their more nefarious activities, and as one which they could dupe naive do-gooders, fuzzy-minded intellectuals, misguided clergymen, and radical journalists to be their pawns. And you know what's so crazy? Somebody sent me a post on Instagram, right? LeBron James, P. Diddy, Jay-Z. I ain't gonna say too much, but y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know what it is. The record shows that the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was neither founded nor is presently directed by colored people. It was originated in New York City 46 years ago as the brainchild of a Southern scallywag journalist and a Russian-trained revolutionary named William E. Whaling. Now, they didn't show us William E. Whaling. Who is William E. Whaling? He's a Russian-trained revolutionary. He was a socialist Republican born into a wealthy family in Louisville, Kentucky. He founded the National Women's Trade Union in 1903. And he is among the co-founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. But you cannot find him up here with the other founders. But we can't be surprised, right? He's a Russian-trained revolutionary. Russian-trained. Like I said, most of these folks were going to come from areas like that. Yet they represent the NAACP. Its principal personalities during its early years were descendants of rabble-rousing abolitionists who formed the strife which precipitated the war between the states. A conflict which could have been avoided but for the activities of the abolitionists. So they saying that a lot of the conflicts in America, like America wouldn't have been so broke at the time. People wouldn't have been so poor at the time. We could have still been free without going to war. But these abolitionists, these communist insurrectionist groups, stirred up a buzz, placing black people against white people. The Democratic Party propaganda, it all worked together to exploit us. Right, and they letting us know right here. They were the ones responsible for the war. The Civil War. Of his 5 founders, only one was a Negro, a communist sympathizing lawyer named W.E. Du Bois, whose record of participation in communist front, and subversive organizations and activities taken from the files of the Committee on Un-American Activities of the United States House of Representatives. These dudes is basically, like the Du Bois and all them, they blackfacing. They basically blackfacing. Right, and what else they got for us? Among his more recent activities of this nature was a donation of his services in the preparation of legal briefs defending since executed communist spies Julius and Ethel Rosenberg and the imprisoned leaders of the Communist Party of the United States. So W.E. Du Bois was working with communist spies who infiltrated, like I was saying, who infiltrated America. These people were part of these other folks who put out the propaganda that stirred up the Civil War. Right, learning about them. Look, we went into Mary White Overton, right? She was an American socialist. So she was a part of that socialist organization, the Socialist Party. And what else we learned? When we go into her history, her family history, right? They were all a part of the Socialist Party once here in America. So W.E. Du Bois was working hand in hand with these people, right? These communists, insurrectionists. That's what we gonna call them, insurrectionists, because they the ones disrupting all the peace that could have been held if not for so much segregation and separation, indoctrination, institutionalization here in America. Right, Du Bois worked hand in hand with communist spies and the leaders of the CP, the Communist Party of the United States. Right, that's like working with China today or Russia. Right, today, in today's terms. In 1953, he was awarded the International Peace Prize by the Communist Front World Peace Council in the recognition of his participation in the sponsorship of the series of communist-dominated World Peace Conferences held since 1949 in an attempt to undermine the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Du Bois was a director of research for the NAACP until 1949 and now is referred to it as the organization's honorary chairman. In addition to Whalen and Du Bois, the other NAACP founders, all white, were Dr. Henry Maskowitz, right? We just looked him up. Socialist Oswald Garrison Villard. He was the grandson of abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison. And Miss Mary Overton White, also a descendant of an old-time abolitionist. This Mary Overton White, who we just saw was a part of the Socialist Party. The first president of the association was white Boston lawyer Moorfield Story, who was identified in his youth with the abolitionist movement and who served as secretary to the original race baiter Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner. The race baiter. He served as secretary to a race baiter. He liked to play the race game. So you know, birds of a feather flock together, and that's always going to be a fact, right? So if he was a race baiter, yep, 9 times out of 10, Moorfield Story, founder of the NAACP, was more than likely a race baiter. Just look at the brother. We putting the trust of our freedom in his hands. Right, y'all don't even want to vote for a president nowadays. To all the pro-black people, how can you stand by this? It's crazy to me. It's crazy to me. Because they play these games on purpose. In front of our face. Right, and because we don't do the research, we don't give ourselves a chance to understand or learn. Right? Let's continue. What it say? From that day to this, self-hating white people with long records of affinity for affiliation with and participation in communist front, fellow traveling and subversive organizations, activities and causes have directed and subsidized the NAACP. They directed and subsidized the NAACP. Listen to that. Think about that. And think about all of the black leaders that we've had in America so far. You know, so many of them can be considered sellouts. Right? I don't follow black history no more. Black history is not my history because it's black. Don't let that go over your head. It's too black for me to see. I can't see. I don't know what's true and what's not true because I cannot see. Y'all covered it up and then blindfolded us. After y'all covered it up. So we definitely can't see. And we blindfold ourselves now. And that's even more sad. But it says its president, Arthur B. Spingarn of New York City, is a white man, as are a large number of the current officers, directors, and principal contributors. The present president, is a white man. Right? The present president of NAACP is a white man. Like I said, but people don't even want, they make a big deal about voting for them now. We're so hyped when Obama got into office. Right? But he sold us out too. That's the crazy part. Right? The files of the House Un-American Activities Committee reveal records of affiliation with or participation in communist front, fellow traveling, or subversive organizations or activities on part of the following present officials of the NAACP. Right? These are all of the people who have affiliation or participation with communist front or communist organizations. The president, the honorary chairman, W.E.B. Du Bois, quote unquote. 11 of 28 vice presidents, the treasurer, 28 of 47 directors, the chairman of the National League Committee, the executive secretary, the special counsel, the assistant special counsel, the Southeast Regional Secretary, the West Coast Secretary, the director of Washington Bureau, the director of public relations, and 2 field secretaries. All of these people in the NAACP have connections and ties to communist groups and organizations. Crazy. Crazy. All of these people in the NAACP, all these people, it's crazy, bro. Connections to the Communist Party. The transcript of this evidence numbers 121 pages of single-spaced, typewritten copy and would require more than 6 hours to be read aloud. Time being a factor, it is impossible to present all of this material. But to give you an idea of the backgrounds and ideologies of the policy-making officials and personnel of the NAACP, I shall cite chapter and verse on the activities of this organization's principal personalities. He about to start bomb dropping. And real quick, for you fools, right, who don't know what communism is, is a type of government as well as an economic system. Individual people do not own land, factories, or machinery. Instead, the government or the whole community owns these things. Everyone is supposed to share the wealth that they create. Why is it bad? It has been criticized as authoritarian or totalitarian, forgot to pronounce it, for suppressing and killing political descendants and social classes, enemies of the people, religious persecution, ethnic cleansing, forced collectivization, and use of forced labor in concentration camps. That's communism, right? Basically what America is sort of kind of swaying to today, right? The government is starting to become enemies of the people, or shall I say the Democratic Party, right? That's what's happening, right? And just look at history, right? Look at all the other communist parties that have existed in history, right? We got the Chinese Communist Party, right? See what happened over there in China. They got the sweatshops, right? At some point, people were restricted on having a certain amount of babies. Like, they control everything, cameras all over the place. That's communism being controlled. Forced collectivization. Right? Forced to work as a group. Forced. Religious persecution. Right? Inquisition. Reconquista. Right? Happened at all different periods, man. Like, America was built off this stuff. As a matter of fact, they stole America from us because of situations like these, like groups like the NAACP. We being misled, we don't know what to fight for, so we don't know how to fight. We can't fight against something that we think is for us but is working against us, right? Look, listen to what he about to say. President Springorn was a participant in the New York Conference on Africa held April 14th, 1944 in New York City by the Subversive and Communist Council on African Affairs. In 1945 and 1946, he signed statements favoring the granting of army commissions to communists and opposing the use of injunctions in labor disputes sponsored by the viciously subversive National Federation of Constitutional Liberties. He is listed as a sponsor of the Communist Front Public Use of Arts Committee. This is the president, right? Boardman Chairman Channing H. Tobias was a member of the executive board and co-chairman of the New York Committee of the Communist Front Southern Conference for Human Welfare, which was charged in 1947 with serving the Soviet Union and its subservient Communist Party in the United States. He belonged prior to 1949 to the Subversive and Communists. Right, this man was with the Communist Party as well. Right, he was with the Communist Party as well. He was with the Communist Party as well. Council on African Affairs, and was a member of the editorial advisory board of the Protestant Digest, a magazine which has faithfully propagated the Communist Party line. Even in magazines, right? Is in magazines, same thing like with newspapers. Like some sway left, some stay right, some sway right. But at the end of the day, it's all propaganda. And they had this busing in the 1950s. At 1950, 1949. In magazines. He sponsored the Subversive and Communist People Institute of Applied Religion and the American Committee for Yugoslav Relief, and was a member of the executive board of the American League for Peace and Democracy. Right? This is so crazy because these people invest so much money in quote unquote American organizations, but it all goes into their funds, right? Their relief funds and these things that build their communities and their people, right? That's why their communities here in America are so wealthy. And we worked hand in hand with them, like the rappers of today. Just like the rappers and entertainers. What else they got? He was a member of the executive board of the American League for Peace and Democracy, the largest of the communist front movements in the United States. The largest. He was a member of the executive board for one of the largest communist front movements in the United States. Right? Chairman Channing H. Tobias. Who is this? Not a copper-colored brother. But hey, again, another activist. Right? Could be of mixed race, but look at that. He's a communist. He's a commie. Sponsoring communist-funded groups. Right, what else they got for us? Roy Wilkins, successor to the late Walter White as NAACP Executive Secretary, was quoted on June 17, 1936 by the New York Daily Worker, the official publication of the Communist Party in this country, as attaching great significance to the 1936 National Communist Party Convention, and stating that the Communist Party's racial program has had a very wholesome effect in the United States. Their racial program has had a very wholesome effect in the United States. What are they trying to say? What racial program? What Communist Party racial program? What can they tell us about this? Let's see. Let's see what they got. What can we get about this? I want to know for myself. A racial program for the 20th century, part of a series on anti-Semitism. It's an imaginary book of the 1950s, purporting a foreign communist plot to increase racial tensions in the United States. It gained public notoriety when a congressman read a supposed quotation from the book to argue against the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Right? And why are they connecting this to anti-Semitism? You know, whatever's connected to anti-Semitism is always something interesting to look into. Always. But they say this is something from a book that was created to increase racial tensions here in America. Who would have knew it would have been that easy for them? So they saying this even in a quote unquote mythological text, quote unquote. Right, but what racial program, if they saying it's mythological, could they be talking about? And what wholesome effect? Right, racism in America today? If the 1950s, he's saying it had a wholesome effect, so that means that was something they was planning years ago. And it succeeded in the 50s, the 40s. They are talking about that plan to incite racism in America. He was further quoted by the Daily Worker on July 15th, 1949, as boasting that he had voted in New York City elections that year for since convicted Negro communist Benjamin J. Davis. He is listed as a member of the National Committee of the Communist Front, International Judicial Association, which has actively defended communists and consistently followed the Communist Party line. Right? A Negro communist, Benjamin J. Davis. And the brother that they speaking about, Roy Wilkins, is also listed as a member of the National Committee of the Communist Front. All these brothers connected to communist groups and organizations. What else? He was a sponsor of the Subversive and Communist Conference on Pan-American Democracy and of a joint meeting in 1937 of the Subversive and Communist American League Against War and Fascism and the Communist Front, American Friends of the Chinese People. Come on now. Come on now. We gotta be smart when we looking into this stuff. You gotta be smart. Make it make sense. What are they trying to say? What are they talking about? American friends are all right. It's not to say we can't be friends with Chinese people. You can always be cool with Chinese folks. But what do we know about the government over there? And what do we know about them over the last 100 years? We got the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And then we have other reigns and regimes that has existed over there that were communists at the time. Let's just Google it. We see it for ourselves. The Communist Revolution was a social and political revolution that culminated in the establishment in the People's Republic of China in 1949. They became communists in 1949. So these American friends of the Chinese people in 1949, what other parties are they talking about? Right, what other parties could they be talking about? These are the people though that Booker T. Washington, right, W.E. Du Bois, they have their connections to peoples like this. Now, this is not talking about the late 1800s. This is only talking about the 1900s and the 1940s, but it all started in the late 1800s. That's where it started. And these same people who founded the party in China have been working with these spies here in America ever since then. That's my opinion. That's my conclusion. They've been working together for an extremely long time now. And there's no denying that, because look at the time frames. Right? We see all of this happen in 1949. Right? 1949. What happened? What we just saw. In 1949, China became communist. In 1949, America became communist. Or hence before that, potentially. Right, so what else they say? What else we got? Special Counsel Thurgood Marshall, the Negro lawyer responsible for the NAACP's court attacks upon segregation in the public schools as late as 1950, was a member of the executive board of the Communist Front. This stuff was taking the world by storm in 1950, but we don't know that. Why? What else was happening in the 50s, right? What was being introduced to black communities? What war happened in 1950? What war was in the 1950s? Let's check it out. The Korean War was going down in 1950. And it was a war between North Korea, aided by China, and South Korea, aided by the UN. Right? The same race wars that were being incited in America, they were inciting this stuff in all over the world. All over the world. All over the world. It's crazy how we could draw these connections. Because US ain't have no business over there in the first place. You know how many people lost their lives in the Korean War? You know how many people died in the Korean War? So many people lost their lives in the Korean War. And so many black people came home with PTSD, shell shock, strung off drugs, going crazy. Going crazy. Going crazy though. We ain't have no business over there. They brought so much drugs back over here to America, and it destroyed our communities. Heroin. Right? It developed, quote unquote, in the United States. Right, heroin in the United States, it was in the Harlem jazz scene, and it was dominated by chorusing gangsters in the U.S. Mafia drug distributors. The U.S. quote unquote aimed to prevent the spread of communism in Asia. Yo, all these, we can connect all this stuff. All of this stuff has some type of connection, right? Got to do more research on it. But look, 1950, it's all at the same time. So they destroying our country while doing business with other countries at the same time. Our own kinfolk, quote unquote, right? These black people, these representatives of the culture, quote unquote. And then they talking about Thurgood Marshall. A communist. Right, he's responsible for court attacks upon segregation in public schools. As late as 1950, was a member of the executive board of the Communist Front. National Lawyers Guild, which has been described as the foremost legal bulwark of the Communist Party, its front organizations and controlled unions. Since its inception, the Guild has never failed to rally to the legal defense of the Communist Party and individual members thereof, including known espionage agents. And as a member of policy-making officials of this Communist Front, Marshall has served as an associate editor of the Lawyers Guild Review, and he has criticized this nation's loyalty program. He is listed as a member of the National Committee of the Communist Front, International Judicial Association, which has actively defended communists and consistently followed the Communist Party line. Thurgood Marshall, get him out of here. Get him out of here. And he was among a group of attorneys in 1947 protested the issuance of contempt citations against pro-communist Hollywood writers who refused to testify before the House of Un-American Activities Committee. So they were been trying to pack up them folks in Hollywood that was on that crazy stuff. They been trying to work against it. But you know, I'm assuming over time you lose these battles where we start becoming suckers of the indoctrination, right? We become fans of Hollywood. So how can they get rid or citate or pack up communist Hollywood if our own people are becoming fans of the same stuff that's meant to destroy us? Stop watching the damn idiot box. The director of the NAACP's Washington Bureau, Clarence M. Mitchell, protested against being asked whether he was or ever had been a member of the Communist Party at a hearing on proposed legislation to outlaw the Communist Party held before the House Un-American Activities Committee on May 3rd, 1950. Here we go, 1950 again. All of this communist stuff happening at 1950. Right, so much changes going on in the 50s, right? We lost Harlem. We lost a lot. Right, we lost a lot to drugs, to racism. Right, we lost a lot. And now that they're talking about communism, I think about the wars and the war on drugs here in America. Nixon and Ronald Reagan, the 60s. Right, coming out of communism. Right, these things have a connection, and we're gonna figure it out. I'm gonna do more research. Right, it says, although he stoutly denied being a communist, he was quoted as saying that such a question was unfair because it immediately precludes from appearing before this committee many of the people who would be on trial under a bill of this kind. The transcript further quoted him as saying that, presumably, there are people who may, for sincere and personal reasons, wish to be members of the Communist Party. For sincere and personal reasons, they wish to be members. They may want to come here and object to this bill, but I suppose if they had to answer that question, they very likely would not come. Right? It's a whole bunch of communist people is what they saying. And they colored. Let's talk about it. Director of Public Relations Henry Lee Moon, the association's propaganda chief, is listed as a member of the Subversive and Communist Washington Bookshop and the likewise designated National Negro Congress, which is the Communist Front movement in the United States among Negroes. Right, these Negroes who want one centralized government and want to be in control and dominate and push us all in a bubble. Right now we all getting put in the hoods. Right, our ways of lives is changing because we following these sellouts. To be frank, these sellouts. His book, Balance of Power, The Negro Vote, was praised by the Daily Worker, communist group, and he was listed in 1949 as a nominee to be commentator for the Subversive and Communist Voice of Freedom Committee. Of the NAACP's 28 vice presidents, the following 11 have records of un-American activities. 28 vice presidents, right? Look, John Haynes, 23 citations. Philip Randolph, 20 citations. The late Mary McLeod Bethune, who is still listed as vice president, and William Lloyd Imes, 16 citations each, un-American activities. Oscar Hammerstein II, the composer, and Bishop W.J. Walls, 7 citations each. This is the 1950s. We are Americans at this point, right? No disregarding that. No disregarding that. They are responsible for un-American activities. At this point, we fighting wars for America and other countries. So what you mean these niggas is doing un-American activities? What un-American activities? They partaking in communist fronts, right? Like, so that they can have control over the population, like the same people today who was pushing that jab. They was pushing that jab, right? Oh, get the jab so you could live. Like bullshit, man. It's all cap, right? At the end of the day, you could just throw it in the gutter. What else we got? Ira W. Jane and L. Pearl Mitchell, 2 citations each. And Willard S. Townsend, T.G. Nutter, and Grace A. T.G. Nutter is crazy. And Grace B. Fenderson, 1 citation each. All of these people cited for un-American activities. Of the 47 members comprising of the Association Board of Directors, the following 28 have records of the un-American activities. Earl B. Dickerson, 25 citations. Algernon D. Black, 18 citations. Louis Gannett, 15 citations. Roscoe Dungy, 13 citations. S. Ralph Harlow and Chairman Channon H. Tobias, 10 citations. William H. Hastie, 9 citations. Hubert T. Delaney, 8 citations. Benjamin E. Mays, president of Atlanta's Morehouse College, 6 citations. The president of Atlanta's Morehouse College got 6 citations of un-American activities. The president of Morehouse College got hit with 6 citations of un-American communist-related activities. Let that sink in. Because we're going to talk about, like I said, the owners and founders of these HBCUs. Communists? Word? And 47 members this time. Accused of having... No, they got hit with 28 un-American citations. Citations for un-American activities. 47 members of the NAACP. 47. Robert G. Weaver, 5 citations. Bill G. Gallagher, 4 citations. President Arthur B. Springorn, Earl G. Harrison, James J. McClendon, Ralph Bunchy, Alan Knight Chalmers, and W. Montague Cobb, 3 citations each. J. M. Tinsley, Wesley W. Law of Savannah, Georgia, Norman Cousins, Z. Alexander, Luby, Harry J. Green, and Alfred Baker Lewis, 2 citations each. And H. Claude Hudson, Carl R. Johnson, A. Maceo Smith, James Hinton, and Theodore M. Berry, 1 citation each. The list just goes on and on and on and on. What else? 2 other vice presidents and 3 other directors are well-known apologists for left-wing causes. Left-wing socialist, quote-unquote, democratic, communist causes. 2 vice presidents of the NAACP. They are Senator Wayne M. Morse of Oregon and Eric Johnston of the motion picture industry. This brings us back to Hollywood. So these folks is commies too. They putting out war propaganda as well. The creation of Yorno, mad stuff. Racism towards the indigenous peoples of America. All that propaganda just to sway the country in specific directions, right? TV separated us. What they showed us on TV created our reality. That was definitely one of the beanstalks that Jack had to climb to reach racism. Right? Other officers of the NAACP with un-American activity records are Lloyd Garrison, Chairman, National Legal Committee, 5 citations, Treasurer Allen Knight Chalmers, and Branch Department Director Gloucester B. Current, 3 citations each. Southeast Regional Secretary Ruby Hurl, West Coast Regional Secretary Franklin H. Williams, Field Secretary Madison S. Jones, and Assistant Special Counsel Robert L. Carter, 2 citations each, and Field Secretary Tara Hall Pittman, 1 citation. But all of the NAACP officials and policymakers listed in the files of House of Un-American Activities Committee, none has a record as notorious as that of W.E. Du Bois, the most notorious communist, to whom I have previously referred as one of the founders and present honorary chairman of the association. No less than 72 citations of communist front, and subversive activity are entered against his name. The latest of which was the statement he issued upon the death of Joseph Stalin, reading, "Let all Negroes, Jews, and foreign-born who have suffered in America from prejudice and intolerance remember Joseph Stalin." Joseph Stalin was a communist, and he also did some crazy things. So why is he saying black people, Jews, and foreign-born? Why do we have to remember Joseph Stalin? And what in the world does that have to do with our history, or our retribution, like getting back as a black man? Like, what does that have to do with us? What are you talking about, W.E. Du Bois? Right? This same W.E. Du Bois was one of the modern scientific authorities whose writings were accepted by the United States Supreme Court as the basis for its decision of May 17, 1954, prohibiting segregation in the public schools. Du Bois contributed to 82 different portions of the book An American Dilemma, which was cited in its entirety by the Supreme Court as an authority for its ruling. And speaking of that decision, let me emphasize in passing that 15 other contributors to An American Dilemma also have lengthy records of pro-communist activity in the files of Un-American Activity Committee. So Du Bois hung out and created content with other members of communist parties. These dudes stuck together like white on rice. Like white on rice. He was more clicked in with them than he was clicked in with the black people here in America, in the hoods, in the ghettos, in the slums. I say it's so funny because out of all of the stuff they say that they did, where is the results? Show me the Carfax. Because right now this check engine light is on. The black community check engine light been on for a long time now. Check engine. The same thing is true of 2 of the 6 individual authorities cited by the High Court. Theodore Bromeld and Franklin Frazier, who between them have been members or identified with 28 organizations declared to be communist fronts, or communist dominated, more commies. Another of the 6 individual authorities cited by the Supreme Court, K.B. Clark, was at the time of arguments before the court on the payroll of the NAACP as a so-called social science expert. Social science expert. to study social communities, right? To conduct science experiments on communities, on people, on social groups. This is how a lot of them like to live. Like, this is how you segregate people. You do stuff like this. This is essentially segregation. You're singling out people based off social experiments, right? And this is what creates social stigmas. Like African booty scratcher. Or black people eat watermelon and drink soda. Or like white people don't wear deodorant. Like, we create these social stigmas due to the stuff that, due to social science experiments and whatnot, right, conducted on us by the government and propaganda. You know, certain clothes is pushed out to our community so we can spend a lot of money, right? It's the truth. That's a social science experiment. And it's a way to keep a group controlled. That is communism. These records of individual officials and members of the NAACP are not the only source of proof of the subversive influences on and in that organization. Elizabeth Dillon reported in her book, The Red Network, that during the 7 years from 1923 to 1930, the NAACP received some $43,000 from the Radical Garland Fund, among whose directors were communist William Z. Foster and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. Right? They were investing, right, or sponsoring the NAACP. These people were getting paid to put out propaganda, and they was happily taking that money and then reinvesting that into other communities that do not contribute to black people, while we all getting pushed into the projects in the hoods because our parents is working factory jobs and stuff like that. But because of the stuff that's going on in our communities, we just can't get it together, right? Single fathers, welfare, paying dads to leave the family just to get on welfare. That's what we had here in America, all at the same time. Communist groups was gifting the NAACP bread so they could separate us further. That's tough, bro. That hurts my heart, because what the hell did I learn in school? What was the purpose of me going to school? Because this is what they taught me, to look up to this group, because they did stuff for us. But I don't know where this money went. Like, where in the community did that money go? Because it's still screwed up. And if anything, people that look like us are not the ones that's buying it back. She also disclosed that the official report of the 4th National Convention of the Communist Party of the United States, held in 1925, stated that the party had penetrated the NAACP. Elizabeth Dillon, she put it on blast. The party had been penetrated by the Communist Party had penetrated the NAACP. This is in 1925. 1925, right? So that means in the 1880s and 90s, during this quote-unquote Reconstruction era, that's when the Communist Party was penetrating America. So what is this Reconstruction era, and how can we just connect this back to black people now? Was it really something that we, could say that we benefited from? Or was it all just a front? Or was it all just to keep these uppity people in positions of power? Right, creating that bourgeoisie, because none of our ancestors touched that bread. I haven't found it. Right? It shows that the NAACP has consistently affiliated itself with communist and left-wing movements. What do we see today? All of these organizations, BLM and the Democrats. BLM and the Democrats. Right? We see insurrection and violence and all of that. I ain't gonna speak too much on it, but what that whole George Floyd point in time taught us, What did it teach us? Right, from 2020 till now, we've been living through this stuff. And it's crazy because you really got to keep your eyes open. It was a member of the American Youth for the Free World, which was organized in 1942. And in 1948 was described by the California Un-American Activities Committee as heavily infiltrated and effectively dominated by the Communist Party. The House Un-American Activities Committee in its 1951 Guide to Subversive Organizations and Publications described the AYFW, American Youth for Free World, as a communist clearinghouse. In 1945, the NAACP sent its branch department director, Gloucester Current, to London as an official delegate representing the association at the founding of the World Federation of Democratic Youth. This federation was cited by the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1948 as part of the Communist International Solar System. A report made at a meeting of Communist Party of the United States on July 16, 1946, showed that the NAACP was one of a group of left-wing organizations invited by the National Committee of the Communist Party to a meeting held in Chicago to form a third party. Big drop. Big drop. Big drop. They held a meeting with commies in Chicago. And we know that the mob, they was holding down Chicago what? At this time, right? Right? And then we got to think about JFK and there's so many different things that we could factor into what was going on at this time. Now that I'm thinking about it. I don't want to go off track, but just think about American history overall. The 50s, the 40s, the presidents, and then inching on the late 50s and the early 60s, like drugs and all of that stuff. Like, it's a big connection here. We got infiltrated from all angles, and they completely screwed our society up. They screwed us up. Right, it says that report, as detailed on pages 150 to 151 of the 1947 report of the House of Un-American Activities Committee, lists the NAACP as an active participant in the conference at which the Progressive Citizens of America was formed. And earlier this month, according to the United Press, the NAACP picketed a hearing on communist propaganda conducted in Chicago by Senator Eastland for the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee. A pamphlet outlining the program of the Communist Party of the United States, published in September 1954 by New Century Publishers of New York City, made specific references on page 22 to a link between the Communist Party and the NAACP, and it stated, "We call upon wage workers, working farmers, the Negro people, small businesses, and professional people, upon the women and the youth, to join hands in a common fight for the democratic demands of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People." Socialism, communism, right? When we Google it, the definition, right? The definition is to get people to create a one-way living, right? No individual living. It's a one-way living. The government owns everything. So they're saying that they want all the people to fight for democratic demands of the NAACP. Commie demands, right? Stuff that's meant to divide us, right? They want us to fight for their demands, but their demands are what's dividing the country. Communism. This is crazy. That's why I say we gotta think about everything that's happening at that time. You got so many people advocating for these groups, but nothing is changing, right? Things were only getting worse. They were only getting worse, right? Just like I said. Former Negro communist Foster Williams Jr. testified before the House of Un-American Activities Committee about this matter on June 17, 1954 in Seattle, Washington. He said, the Communist Party very sneakily manipulates the Negro people for their own purposes. The NAACP has had this trouble. A former Negro communist, Foster Williams Jr. Who is he? Who was Foster Williams Jr.? Let's see if we could get some drop on him. Foster Williams Jr. He was General Secretary of the Communist Party in USA. Right? So if this is the same person that they talking about, they calling him a Negro? And he put it on blast that they got trouble with the Communist Party manipulating Negro people. Like today, we are manipulated. The young generation is manipulated. The older generation is manipulated. My father truly believes that Joe Biden was going to make a difference. Because I'm assuming one of the reasons, and this is just me taking a jab at him, was because if you don't vote for him, you not black. Madness. The racial aims of the Communist Party of the United States and those of the NAACP are virtually identical. The Communist Program, as reported in May 26, 1928, issue of the Daily Worker, calls for full racial equality, abolition of all laws which result in segregation of Negroes, abolition of laws forbidding intermarriage of persons of different races, abolitions of all laws and public administration measures which prohibit or in practice prevent Negro children from attending general public schools or universities, right? And all of this stuff does not sound bad, right? Does not sound bad, but it would not end the racism. It only incited the racism, but it wasn't bad to do it, you know, because why not give people a chance to extra opportunities and stuff, right? But it was the purpose behind it. Like, the money being made from these organizations were not being invested back into the community, right? They were only harboring more bread and keeping us stuck in the hood, because over time these same environments, they sold off to the highest bidder, just like Harlem and the townhouses, and packed us up right out of there. We sold them, as a matter of fact. Like I said, sellouts. And it says, right, on the basis of the evidence now in hand, a minute portion of which I have related to you this afternoon, no other conclusion can be drawn but that the NAACP is used as a front-end tool by subversive elements in this country. Either knowingly or unwittingly, it has allowed itself to become part and parcel of the communist conspiracy to throw the democratic governments of this nation and its sovereign states to overthrow. And that's what it is, right? That's what it is. Right? Just like now, how like I didn't even know certain states is selling land to China. I didn't even know you can do that. I thought it was one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. But right, even if that didn't apply to colored people, that don't apply to nothing in America. Anything is up for grabs at this point. Looking into it, right? When we look into it, right? But I just wanted to go through this one today, man, for y'all, just so that we could talk about it. Like, who knew? Who knew? Who knew that? Right? Like, we got to look at it from this perspective, right? We knew there was a bougie class of uppity colored folks. We always knew that. But who knew that the same people that they teach us to hold in high regard, like, yeah, those them folks, right? They did so much for us. Who would have knew that these same people were the ones who sold us out? They would have been the Criollos or the mulattoes, right, of the 1700s. The people who knew they were free. They knew they were wealthy. They know their families are not Africans, right? They know they came off of these merchant ships, these indentured servant ships. They know this already, right? So they're going to take advantage of whatever opportunities they could get and pass as white or mulatto until they can, until they don't have to no more, until they could take over as quote unquote black people and benefit from black people's struggle. This is what we were dealing with. That's what we were dealing with, y'all. But you know, like I said, man, we talking about the Reconstruction era in the American South. This is where all of this stemmed. It's where it started. So we got to get to the root. Part 3, we jumping into chapter 2 of the book, of the Reconstruction era book, and we're going to talk a little bit about this J. Edgar Hoover situation, and maybe talk about this HBCU stuff too. You know, I feel like we need, especially right now, we just need to be up on game, because it's hot up in that kitchen right now, and if we're not thinking right, we're not educating ourselves on this stuff and understanding what's really going on, we're going to fall for the okie doke. We're going to fall for that same okie doke, you know, them white folks in blackface. And then our so-called leaders still misguiding us. Misrepresentations of what it truly means to be a melanated being, man. We go crazy, bro. We got to let loose in love, man. Peace and love, man. Copper color love, man. It's a copper colored king. We just went crazy again, man. Another dope live stream in the books. And I appreciate those who tuned in, man. Next time, let's get this comment section busting. I know I done completely threw the algorithm off. Used to seeing me on Fridays, Saturdays. This damn job, man. My labor camp threw me off. But it's alright though, because we still on it. We still on it, man. I appreciate y'all, man. It's the Copper Color King, man. Reconstruction era in America South, part 2. Like, comment, and subscribe. Like I said, the coloring book is about to drop real soon. We're going to go on a promo run for that. I can't wait to get it out there, man. Let's keep learning, keep growing, keep developing. Copper Color love, man. Let's get it.